Justin, it's great to sit down with you this morning. Would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about Bereave?
Yeah, thanks, Jesse, for the opportunity here. My name is Justin Clifford. I live in Indianapolis. I work at Bereave with my three teammates that are building the company and supporting not just employees, but employers as they navigate death, grief at home and at work.
Yeah, and I'm excited that we finally have had the opportunity to sit down. It is on the heels of setting up a partnership between StartupExperts and Bereave. I know a few members in our community have lost loved ones, and your organization's name has come up a few times, and the feedback has been great. Can you share more specifically, what you're doing for these individuals and how you approach this need?
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, we exist to help people navigate death at home and at work. And what that means is that we have a software platform that provides all employees with some guidance, a place to turn, right? So over and over and over again in all of our research and the conversations that we have and thousands of data points at this point, when people tell us about their specific loss and when they share this very vulnerable experience, they often say, we didn't know where to turn, and we heard that over and over and over again. So we built that. We built the place to turn for people when they're experiencing a loss. On the flip side of that, the other thing that we heard over and over and over from people is what their manager did and how their workplace showed up. And in most cases, Jesse, and this is where it gets a little bit sad, but in most cases, like these are pretty awful stories. There are some heartwarming stories that go along with that. But when you think about HR teammates and businesses and managers, nobody really gets trained on how to show up in these moments, right? So we basically took all the stories that we've heard, really tried to harness the heartwarming stuff and really try to eradicate the awful stuff and built a platform, the other side of our platform for HR leaders and managers so that they can develop the support system at work around their employees who are going through that loss.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, I spend a lot of time in employee benefits in my day job. And certainly this is an area that is hard.
Mhm.
It is, something that both a leadership team might not have the skill set or the experience on how to, properly emotionally support their employees, but also the employees are going through a really hard
Mhm.
time. And I know there was some statistics and, you know, if you could share them about how often this actually happens, because this is a very
Mhm.
real thing, whether it is publicly shared amongst one's colleagues or
Mhm.
privately shared with the with their leadership team.
Yeah, we get asked about the prevalence of death a lot, and so much so that we share a few stats with people just to whether or not they become customers of ours doesn't really matter, but we want to educate people on how often death happens to people in the American workforce. And the simplest stats are that 1 in 18 people will lose a spouse, child, sibling, or parent each year. Right, that's 1 in 18. That in traditional family structures, that'll tell you that's probably pretty profound loss. When you expand that and think about modern family dynamics, if you add aunt and uncle, grandparent, and close friend to that, that turns into 1 in 9. Okay. So we haven't at that point talked about pets. We haven't talked about blended families. We haven't talked about in laws. We haven't talked about pregnancy loss, which is probably the biggest type of loss out there that employers never hear about, right? When you dig in one step further and you think about how the employer response can impact people's employee experience, we found that 51% of people that suffer a close loss, I should say, leave their job within 12 months. And I've been through a few exit interviews in my life, and and just a few, but I've never been asked that whether or not I've suffered a loss on my way out. And so there is a leaky talent bucket from people that are experiencing loss that probably isn't getting caught in those exit interviews, right? And so we're working to not just help prevent that turnover, in a lot of cases, very unnecessary turnover, very controllable turnover, but we're also trying to help HR leaders and managers really start to understand the data, understand not just what happens at a national level, but also what happens inside their own organization. So we're doing that a few things with features inside of our platform, but we think it's really, really important that they know that they can actually show with data how they are showing up in terms of retention, productivity, things like that. Not just to build an ROI, but also to understand how to be there for people and that it impacts the P&L. It's not just this squishy human thing, but there's actually serious consequences or benefits to showing up in the right way.
Yeah, no, those are remarkable statistics. And, I think about these employee benefits that are, often marketed and, underutilized. And,
Hmm.
thinking about those data points, I mean, this truly is a benefit that, a large percentage of an employee group could use. And certainly when we're talking about work productivity, being able to support an employee and get them back into, a good mental state and be able to be a productive employee again, is remarkable. Would you share a little bit about, from a practical perspective, what does Bereave help as it relates to an HR leader or a
Hmm.
leader of a team, and what could an employee expect if that HR leader ended up engaging Bereave?
Yeah, great question. I like the way you frame that. I think from an HR leader perspective, think about playbooks or frameworks or whatever you want to call them, but basically a journey to be able to act instead of having to think. And we talk to so many HR leaders who say things like, we want to do more. We don't know how, right? We show them how and we give them the step by step so they can think less, they can act more, they can engage more and build that support system. So I think that's number one is just those playbooks, right? Number two is training and a little bit of development. There are a couple things that we do both inside the platform and live like this with like kind of live subject matter expert workshops. We want to make sure that the managers of our customers have a very foundational, like 101 level understanding of what empathy and compassion mean in the workplace, how grief shows up in the workplace, how it can impact work, what to say, what not to say, right? Again, we're not asking anybody to become a grief counselor, right? Or to get some clinical certification. We are asking people to understand the very baseline so that they know, those managers and those leaders know not just what to do in those moments, but what to do potentially for the foreseeable future to make sure, especially when you've got high functioning people that you spent so much time and money and effort into hiring, to make sure that you can keep them on the team in that manner to the best extent that's controllable. And there are some things that aren't controllable, but most of the stories that we hear are very, very controllable. Um, the employee on the receiving side of a manager and an HR leader who have these tools at their disposal, um, they can expect to be kind of pulled close instead of pushed away,
Mhm.
what is kind of basically what happens now with, handing somebody an 800 number to call, maybe sending flowers. Like those are all okay things and we would advocate for them. But that's just the beginning, right? So to have as an employee to have in these moments the knowledge that an employer can show up like this just instills deeper confidence, probably builds a considerable amount of loyalty, but builds a bunch of confidence inside of that employer in building that relationship as they move forward. So they'll feel things like compassion and empathy, of course, but they'll also be given tools. They'll also be able to share things with their family, right? So that extends outside of the workplace. And these are all things that are developed inside of our product, but that are, if you will, the HR team, the company, the manager ultimately get credit for. It's not Bereave getting credit. It's the company and the people that run it are getting the credit, which most people aren't asking for, but they certainly deserve.
Yeah, I'm so impressed. Very excited to partner with you and the team. Thank you for allowing, the ability for Startup Experts members to access and experience Bereave for themselves as well. So I'm super appreciative of that.
Of
If
course.
Startup Experts members would like to get in touch with you, either for the ability for them to use it, but also to explore potentially
Mhm.
bringing it into their company, how can they do that?
Yeah, a couple of ways. Bereave.io is our website. They can always email me. It's justin@bereave.io and relatively active on LinkedIn on a daily basis. So DMs there will be seen pretty quickly as well. So either all three methods really can get to us pretty quickly.
Great. Well, thank you for your time and certainly your knowledge, and look forward to, speaking further.
Heck yeah. Thanks, Jesse. Really appreciate it.